Well, welcome. It's so exciting to have everybody here after lunch. Are people feeling kind of a post-lunch lull? Did anybody have a beverage with lunch? I'm seeing some nodding heads here. Yeah, it's Austin. Welcome to Austin. Yeah. All right, so we will get underway. Today's theme, designing tech for children's well-being. I'm going to be awkwardly looking at slides that are all the way over there because we don't have any other reference in front of us right this moment, so apologies. You can just read things out loud to us if we get lost. So I want to begin, first of all, by asking folks what background you have or what brings you to this. So maybe as a little post-lunch exercise, stand up if you are in a design role in whatever entity you work for. Woo! Right, look at that. That's great. Yay. Okay, thank you. You can sit. How about folks who are in a non-design role but in a company that makes things, digital things? Okay, that's good. Thank you. How about folks who are in the policy, regulation, making things better with standards and things like that? Thank you for coming. We have a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Awesome. Thank you. Stand up if your favorite Muppet is Grover. Right. Yay. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Good. Well, welcome to all of you, irrespective of your role in the organization you work for. So I just want to begin by sharing a little bit about what this panel is and is not about. The idea of children's well-being is a really broad one. For many folks, that encompasses things like child safety and privacy, online marketing, teen mental health, and social media and those kinds of things. And we want to acknowledge that those are really important issues that we need to get right. And there are a lot of organizations, fortunately, who are working on those issues. However, today's topic is related to those things, but also different. We are interested in establishing what good looks like. And getting folks in an aspirational orientation what we want for kids. What does well-being mean for children? And more importantly, and maybe interestingly to all of you, is how do children define their own well-being? And how can we learn from them? And figure out how to design digital experiences that not only keep them safe, but also help them thrive. So that is sort of the premise for this work today. We're going to talk about an initiative called RITEC that you're going to hear a lot about from different perspectives on this panel that is based on a, child-centric, inclusive global approach founded in research. So we're going to try and cover all those bases for you today. Next slide, please. Where is the clicker? There's the clicker. Okay, so look, those photos match the seats here, so I'm just going to start with Jen on the far end here. Hi, Jen. So Jen leads UX research and content strategy for the Google Kids and Family team, and she is a developmental scientist with a ton of expertise in children's engagement with media. I know this firsthand because we used to be colleagues at Sesame Workshop. Welcome, Jen. Thank you. So each of these people, by the way, is going to have their own section to talk about parts of the work, so they will introduce themselves more at that time. Elizabeth Milavidov, our colleague from LEGO. Thank you for coming all this way. She is a global digital child safety lead, and also digital parenting and safety expert, and many other things, actually, that will probably emerge over the course of our conversation today. Thank you so much. And then last is Jan Plas, here to my right, who is the chair in digital media and learning sciences at the small institution in New York you've heard of, maybe called NYU. He's also the founding director of the Create Lab there. I'm sure he'll say some words about that. So this is our group today. My name is Michael Preston. I didn't mention that when I started this talk 10 minutes ago. I'm the executive director of the Joan Gens Cooney Center. We are a research and innovation lab inside Sesame Workshop, also in New York City, which is the nonprofit that makes Sesame Street. Our work is to basically bring Sesame-inspired design principles out into the world beyond Sesame. So we work with folks who make things for kids, public media stations, design teams, startups, coalitions of game developers, and folks who really want to do right by the people that they serve. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about that later if you're interested. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so I said we were going to talk about RITEC today. RITEC, Responsible Innovation in Technology for Children, is the full name of this initiative. It is an international, multi-stakeholder, cross-sectoral collaboration. It means a really large group of people are involved in this project. It was initiated a couple of years ago by the LEGO Group and UNICEF, and it is supported by the LEGO Foundation. It is grounded in this idea that the design and development of digital technology fundamentally should be grounded in child rights and in well-being as an aspirational outcome. I think we'll talk about this today, but as I said at the beginning, safety, security, and privacy are fundamental. We tend to focus on those things more, and we're imagining in this what could happen if we define well-being in a way that is child-centric and can be understood by a lot of people. What could we do if we try to tune designers toward that path? We are focused primarily on equipping industry and the policy community with tools. So as we move on in this project, we'll be looking to actually make this actionable, applicable to real work, so that it is not just a nice-to-have research framework on a shelf, but something that people look to for guidance, see as valuable in their work, and then propagate as sort of fundamental for new product design. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned that this was a international, cross-sectoral, everybody working together kind of thing. And so in addition to LEGO and UNICEF, these are most of the partners, if not all. The Young and Resilient Research Center conducted what we'll call phase 2 research. We'll talk about it in a moment with UNICEF. A wonderful center that you should look up if you're not familiar with them already, led by Amanda Third. The Create Lab at New York University, which John will talk about. The CUNY Graduate Center is also a participant, and these others, and we are last on the list there. Next slide, please. And we're talking about a 4-phased approach. Phase 1, define well-being. This actually is a phase that had concluded last year with a report. There will be a link in a future slide to that report that was about creating this shared research-based child-centric definition, which we'll look at in a moment. Phase 2, test the framework. Take that out into the world to explore how it shows up in children's well-being in digital play environments. Jan will talk about that work. Phase 3, integrate the components. That means take our learnings from phases 1 and 2 and bring them into other industry commercial spaces to see how they do. And then lastly, phase 4 is advocacy. And so that is showing up at conferences and to talk about this work and other things to really activate this work, to make sure that it's not just a publication that people cite in papers, but actually use in improving how digital products get made for kids. Next. All right. I'm sorry I'm kind of rattling on here. I'm giving you all the groundwork so that we can move to our panelists here and talk about the work broadly. So I said earlier that this was research-based and child-centric. The work that UNICEF and Young and Resilient conducted involved both an analysis of surveys of 34,000 kids from 30 countries, yes, 30 countries, as well as an amazing amount of participatory research in 13 countries, many of which are featuring children who are underrepresented in their current research. And these were I think over 20 workshops, 5 hours workshop, really getting down into the weeds and talking to kids and understanding in their own words how they define their well-being. Next slide, please. The principles that drive this work are on the screen. We've discussed child-centric, international and representative, and data-driven. The idea is that the work that we're doing here together, I mentioned at the beginning, is aspirational. And the idea that this is aspirational for us as designers, for the LEGO Group, for Sesame Workshop and the CUNY Center, and all the others here, is true. But this work is driven by the aspirations of the young people whose voices are in the report. And so what you're going to be learning about is what they say. Highlights include the imperative for safety. The kids need to feel safe in order to feel that they can play. That they want time for creativity, that they feel the most well-being when they're being creative and when their imaginations have been activated. or that they even know when their time is up and they want to move on to something else, that in spite of the language about kids being addicted to technology, kids in our surveys, in the participatory workshops have said that when they like to do other things, they like to move on and they're less preoccupied with technology than we think, maybe. Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. And then I promised you a URL. That is where the research report and the framework is located, if you can type that into something. And the elements of the framework appear on the circle. I'm sure they're not well visible to you. So I encourage you to take a look at the report, look at the framework, consider it. These are ideas that are meant to challenge you, to open your mind to new possibilities for design. And I hope that you take something away from our session today that is meaningful to you and stay in touch. So we'll talk about that later too. Okay, that's the end of my section. Is there another slide? Okay, good. I promised that I would transition to phase 2, and Jan, you're up.
Thank you, Michael, and hello, everybody. The project in phase 1 involved coming up with a framework that would define what well-being actually means, what we mean by well-being. And in phase 2, we set out to actually validate this framework or begin its validation. And for that, there's a number of steps involved. We can go to the next slide. They're, of course, empirical, involving research. And the first one, the first decision we had to make is which games to include. And another decision we had to make is what research methodologies to use and which participants to include. And so the project that we conducted started out by playtesting to say which games should actually be included in this research. Next slide. And we reviewed about 50 or 60 games that are potential candidates and made a number of criteria that we developed on how to select the games. And on the right-hand side, you see the games that met our criteria. You see Angry Birds, you see Plants vs. Zombies, Lego Tower, Builder's Journey, World of Goo, Rocket League Sideswipe. Those are the games we selected. They needed to meet criteria such as be playable on a mobile device because of where we were going to do the research. They needed to be able to playable without internet connection. They needed to be appropriate for children. They needed to have multi-language support. So there were a number of very practical requirements. But then, of course, one of the requirements had to be, do we see any promise in these games for potential to affect well-being in children in a positive way? And so in this playtesting research, that's exactly what we did. So we had children playing these games 20 minutes at a time. And we observed their gameplay based on the indicators that we found in our well-being definition. And we scored anytime we saw some promise that the kids were actually engaging in something that could be potentially leading to well-being. So if you look at the next slide, we came up with these well-being profiles for the different games. And here I'm just showing 2 of them. And in those profiles, you see the various aspects of the framework. There's competence, there's agency, there's belonging, there's curiosity and openness, there's all these other variables that you see. And for each of them, we scored, when we saw an occurrence of that, we scored that, and the greener the field, the more occurrences did we see. So you see, for instance, the first game was Lego Tower, and there was a lot of agency and autonomy. And the game below was Lego Builder's Journey, and here we see a lot of competence kind of activities that the game's engaged with. If you're interested in how we measure that, I'm happy to have that as a conversation, but this was a player observation that we did with observation forms where researchers scored what was happening with the players. So based on those profiles, we could say, okay, now there's promise that there could actually be well-being implications, but of course this is not evidence for that. It's just to say, now we know that we can include those games. So in the next phase, we actually have 3 different approaches, and that to me is quite unique for research like this one, where one group at the University of Sheffield is using ethnographic approaches that involves eco-home visits. In eco-home visits, the researcher actually goes into the home and observes the kids playing with their parents, so that they get the context, they have a very deep insight into who the players and the parents are, and they can understand well-being in the context of a family. In another type of study, we have a university in Australia conduct research with biometrics. So here we have the player with a wristband or other sensors measuring skin conductance, EEG, those kind of variables. to see indicators at that level, at the physiological response to gaming, and we can draw conclusions from that. Our approach is the third approach, and we can go to the next slide, which is experimental designs. Now, in experimental designs, you do a pre-post design. That means you measure the variables of interest before, then you have some kind of an intervention, and then you measure the same variables afterwards. And what we included as measures are questions like well-being. And what do people do? How do they play? What games do they play? What's their background? Who are they? Who are their parents, etc. So we get a pretty comprehensive picture of the players, and we get a picture of their game behaviors and the parents' game behaviors. And then we observe them for 10 weeks, 1 or 2 sessions a week, playing games in an after-school program. And those were the 6 games that I showed you earlier. So the next slide shows our research study. This is in New York City. Next slide, or better yet, in some outer borough in New York City. Next slide is, we actually had one part of the study running right now in South Africa. This is in Cape Town, in one of the townships, and in another school. Next slide. This is one of the other schools in Cape Town, and on Sunday I'm flying to Santiago, and we're implementing the same study in Santiago. So we have a sample of participants that is based in the US, in South Africa, and in South America, and will in the end be able to aggregate across those 3 cultural sites, or possibly find differences where we keep reporting that separately. So again, the idea of the study was we give you those pre-tests, you play for 10 weeks, and there's post-test, and then there's a control group that doesn't get to play, at least not during the study. They get to play afterwards. And so we have a pre-post-test control group design. That means we have a comparison to a group that wasn't part of the play. Now, the first thing that you may have noticed, and that several people have noticed, is that the games that we selected aren't multiplayer games. And there was a lot of questions about why aren't you including social games, right? Play is social. Well, guess what? We did a social network analysis, if you go to the next slide, please, that actually shows no matter what games you give people, it is a social event, right? Play is social no matter how you do it, and even if the game itself doesn't support play, the game with a capital G, as Jim G would say, does support play, right? So we have, in the social network analysis, we showed that of the players, several were very active with a lot of other players, some of them not as much, but this is all preliminary analyses that we're going to continue, but you see it was definitely a social event for them. I also have some other preliminary findings, and this is hot off the press. You're the first ones to hear about it, where, next slide please, we administered a well-being measure that's called KidScreen 27. This was developed by the EU with the participation of several European countries and has since been adopted worldwide. That is a well-being measure that includes physical well-being, emotional well-being, several other variables around it. And here we found that in the play group, the kids who got to play, those who scored especially low on that well-being measure had statistically significant increases between the first time we measured before and the second time we measured after. That means their well-being, according to this internationally accepted measure, increased over the course of our gameplay, where the control group did not see the same increase. So we had similarly measured that in the control group, and we didn't see those increases, which means we can attribute those changes to the games. So this is the first finding that we found incredibly encouraging. So digital gameplay, if you select the right games, actually can lead to those outcomes. And then the second one, we're often very concerned, next slide please, that games are a very solitary behavior and that kids get lonely when they play games. But when we look at the correlational results of how many hours did kids report playing every week and their report of loneliness, we actually found a significant relation such that the more play they report, the less lonely they reported being. So this is also very encouraging, and we didn't find any gender differences in this or any other differences in loneliness or well-being measures, which was also very encouraging. So those are some findings on the experimental side, and I just very quickly want to go through some questions about parents. So the next slide. One of the major problems or questions we get is about screen time. I don't know about you, but whenever I talk about games, whenever I talk about any of those things, parents say, yeah, but screen time is such a difficult thing for us to manage, and how can we limit screen time, etc. And so for that reason, we also talked to parents. We had a parent survey with over 450 people, And when you look at the next slide, you see on the left-hand side a graph that shows how much parents report co-playing with their children. And on the left-hand side, that higher blue bar means younger children, 8 years old, and then all the way to the right, they're 17. So co-play does decrease. But we see gaming is actually something that parents do together with their children, and that co-play is, to us, a very important component of well-being. What we also looked at is we now have generations of parents who are gamers themselves. That didn't used to be the case, but there are a lot of gamers who now have children. And when you look on the right chart, you see that those parents who are gamers engage more with their children around the gameplay than non-gamer parents. So this is also some very interesting results from the parent research. And then the final slide, and I promise this is my last graph. I know every graph cuts your audience in half, but here we have on the left side parents' attitudes about gaming. What is their general attitude about gaming? That is the x-axis on the left one. And on the y-axis, we see their belief that games can actually increase well-being. And you see the more they believe in general that games are a good thing, the more they think that they can increase well-being. And those blue dots are the gamer parents. And they are the ones with the especially strong beliefs that games are something valuable and that they increase well-being. And on the right side, we see parent engagement related to child well-being. And here again, the gamer parents are the ones who are strongly engaged with their children, and that's based on their belief as well. So that is something that we want to translate into recommendations. And here's the first one that I wanted to show you based on interviews we did with parents. The pain point is that when parents co-play with their kids, and we're talking about 8 to 12-year-olds, there is a lot of boredom reported from parents where they find that the gameplay that they would want to do with the children is just not engaging them, or it's too difficult for the child. So this mother was talking about how she's not really able to help her child play because she doesn't play. But on the right-hand side, the father is reporting, and that's my favorite quote, a lot of games will have multiplayer, but they're pitting you against each other. Well, I'm going to smoke my 9-year-old in a game if we play. That's not fun for them, right? And so what we need, and that's the first recommendation we would have if you're a designer, is to think about multiplayer cooperative play with varied tasks and leveling abilities where everybody gets their level of the task in the game, the gamers, the parents, and the child. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Okay, so just like Michael did, I do have just 2 little quick questions for you. You can just raise your hand, you don't have to stand. How many of you play video games? Wow. And how many of you played with Lego when you were a kid? This is so cool. I have like the best job in the world. Okay, so Sarah, next slide, please. I have to crane my neck. I'm going to look this way. It's a little bit more natural. So, why are we even trying to build a better tech future, right? So I think you just answered the question for me. You're playing games. We're talking about a trusted and valued company, which is the Lego Group. But we've all seen that the internet is ubiquitous, right? After the pandemic, we have just seen that kids are more and more online. So what is that next natural consequence is to try to find a way and a place for them to play safely and responsibly. Okay, Sarah's taking pictures. Next slide. I caught her. Okay, so then why is the Lego Group really even interested in this responsible digital play? It goes without saying that the Lego Group has been creating brick for over 90 years, right? Just had an anniversary. And when you talk about all of the work that went in creating a trusted and safe brick, we are now looking at that for digital spaces. We know that children are there. We know that there's innovation. There are ways to create responsible digital playgrounds because, let's face it, kids are playing online. And so what exactly are we doing about it? This is the fun part. I'd like to talk a little bit about phase 3. So again, we've understood with children and learning through play that children are creative, right? Children are able to play with bricks. Now imagine when we're taking that into digital spaces. So one of the things that we are looking at is how to develop some of those lifelong skills of creativity, communication. A lot of these things are the same RITEC outputs that we found in phase 1. And so really what I get to do right now in phase 3 is help embed these 8 RITEC outputs into some of our Lego digital experiences and engagements. So just imagine, we have, in the company, we have creative play labs, we have kids tech, there's some kids tech people in the background, whoop whoop, there's a whoop whoop right there, they're raising their hands. They are the ones who are running the Lego Play Lounge, the creativity lab. So if you get a chance, room 403, that was for Megan. When we sit there, we also have a game division, and all of these people are trying to look and see how we can take the RITEC, those 8 outputs, things that we want to see, that creativity, that connection, the self-regulation, and how we can actually embed them into a Lego digital game. And you're thinking, Lego digital games, can anyone name a Lego digital game? Thank you. Okay, yes, I appreciate it. I know that everyone's thinking, Minecraft and Roblox. We've been doing digital games for over 25 years. We have also pioneered robotics, right, like Mindstorms. We also did Super Mario Brothers, not to mention Lego Life, which is the first child social network. You're nodding your head, thank you. We did all of these things with safety and responsible digital play being first of mind. So I just wanted to show you some of these things, as I've just mentioned them, just about how we are working with digitally smart families, trying to share a lot of our digital services. Oh, thank you for taking the screenshots, I love it. You can go to the website and you can download some of these things to look at and play with further. I think what's also really important to remember is that we were the first toy company to create a digital child safety policy with UNICEF in 2015. So we're really at the forefront of trying to create this digital, responsible, and safe landscape. Okay, so this is something else that I just have to share because I have started with the Lego Group. It's just been 16 months now. Before that, I was a child online safety expert in Europe and in the United States. Yes, you can hear the California accent, but believe it or not, I've lived in France longer than I've been in the States. What I was able to do was, with the Responsible Child Engagement team, we created these 5 principles. And what's really cool with digital safety, digital privacy, you can read them. I think I should probably just explain one, which is responsible digital play. This covers things like monetization and geolocalization. And the 5th one, of course, is digital well-being. We are trying at the Lego Group to make sure that every single department, not just the games, not just the digital designers, but that everyone, from legal to brand to government and public affairs to a Lego brick retail store, that we all think about children's digital child rights and well-being, that it's top of mind across the group. 25,000 employees. Again, my job is very, very cool. Next slide. Thank you. And so then this was the phase 3 part, again, that I had mentioned, where we are actually embedding this. We're working. The digital designers are coming up. One of them, Megan, she can actually show you in the Creative Lounge what she has done with the RITEC 8 and how she's incorporating it into Lego building instructions. I'm telling you, it's something that you need to see because it's very cool. But as they are all trying to figure out the best way to make sure that we see these outputs in everything that we do. Next slide, I think that's the last one. So, nope, it's not. So I just wanted to put some of these questions out to you because you're all here because you want to design for tech, for children. And so these are some of the questions that I would love for you to think about. And really, I am not saying this just because I'm here, but reach out to me. We would love to hear from you. We would love to know what you're doing in your spaces and how we can work together and really make an effort. Thank you for that big smile. It's like, yes, I'm going to call. Okay, over to you, Jen.
Awesome, thank you so much. The person from the big tech company is going the least tech with her speaking notes, right? Yes. So what I wanted to talk about is how RITEC and other kind of frameworks that come out through nonprofit organizations or other NGOs or academia, how that gets implemented into a place like Google. And what I want to explain is sort of the 2 ways this happens. One, just thinking about the kinds of products that Google has for children and the way we think about children, and then how we are incorporating RITEC. And then thinking about seeing what RITEC has provided and thinking, what else can we do? What other things can we create? What other research do we need to do? So I manage the research and content strategy team at Google, and we have Sarah Engel and Aruj Jaffer also in the audience. Please come talk to us in the Lego room afterwards if you want to hear more about what we do and the products that we serve. Google thinks about creating for kids in terms of three important ways. Protect. We want to protect kids, make sure that their experiences online are safe, that there are default protections in place, and that we're making sure that we're serving the right content to them. The second pillar is respect. We also understand that not all children are different, not all families are different cultures have different beliefs about how they want children to be interacting with the internet. And so we have a set of parental controls and other kinds of controls that allow people to have agency over how they want their children experiencing the internet. And the third, which really speaks to a lot of what the RITEC 8, I keep calling it, not the Chicago 9, but the RITEC 8 is kind of how I think about it, that really we are hoping to empower children. There's so much that the internet and digital tools have to offer. It is a tool, and it is a tool that has a lot of great things on it. It has some stuff that is not appropriate for kids, and we want to make that distinction, but we don't want to shut off all of these great opportunities for kids. And so there's so much about the RITEC 8 that really speaks to that empowerment, that agency, that self-regulation, all of that great stuff that can come out. And a lot of the frameworks that come out about digital well-being really are more from a deficit model of, oh, we have to protect the internet is a very scary place. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but I also think we can think about all the affordances that the internet can provide. And so I just want to give a highlight of a couple of the products that we have at Google that really speak to protect, respect, and empower. First, we have the teacher program on Google Play, and it's called the Expert program in some countries, or the teacher-approved program in the US. And Sarah Engel can talk about that with you afterwards. If you are an app developer and wondering how to get your app teacher-approved, I think the first thing to do is go to the Play Academy, the Play Developer Academy, and really you'll see there all the great things that we're expecting if it's going to be teacher-approved. And also read the RITEC 8 because they're very, very aligned. And so seeing when we have this product, basically it's that we have teachers review apps to see whether they're developmentally appropriate for kids of various ages, to see if there's good quality content in them. And there is a tab in the Play Store. I'm not sure how many of you have Android phones, but if you do, you have access to the Play Store. It's the equivalent to the App Store if you use iOS. But the Play Store has a Kids tab, and all of the content in that is teacher approved. And that means that you've had experts, teachers look at that content and make a decision that that content is appropriate for kids. And there's all sorts of guidelines about what can get in there. But that is a good way to get your content, if it's high quality, elevated, because it'll get that badge, and having that badge means that it's a signal to parents that the content is high quality, and that it was rated by humans as such, right? And so when something like RITEC comes out, and we look at that, and we look at our own guidelines, we look, are they very aligned? And we see, yes, in fact, they are very aligned, and it also just gives us additional language to use for those guidelines. So that's one piece of it. And part of this high quality program, we have Google Kids Space, which is taking the best of the best and the free content and putting it on an Android Kids mode that is designed for children 3 to 8. And so that takes the high quality content, things and books and apps and videos that are really curated to make sure that that is a safe experience for kids. So that is called Google Kids Space. So it is tied to the teacher approved program. And then also we have Family Link, which is a parental regulation, parental control app that allows parents to set up parameters around the amount of time children spend on digital technology, the kind of content that they're exposed to, and also lets parents know, oh, your child played this game, you might want to talk about this kind of activity with them because they seem to like this kind of game. And so it's an opportunity for parents and children to sort of talk about the rules of their family, and different families can set different settings depending on the age of the child. We also, and Rouge works a lot on this, is we are the group that really focuses on how to get kids in the right state online and how to set up accounts for kids so that we know that they are safe and protected. There are other things that the company does. We have Safe Search, there's YouTube Kids, there's different there's high quality content on YouTube. That's not specifically within my group, but Google really thinks very strongly about this. So those are the things we were ordinarily doing, and then RITEC comes along and we take that information and we look at it and we say, is this aligned with what we're doing? And where it isn't, we think, oh, how can we use some of this language to support it? And for the most part, it really was. But then we see something like RITEC, and we look at that and we think, what are the meanings of some of these things? So we talk about well-being. You'll see different things in there, like creativity and agency and exploration. And I'm using some of the wrong words, I think, for each of them, but empowerment is one of them. And we think, okay, so what does that mean as we think about creating new content, new experiences? And so we extended some of that research. Part of one of the things I do at Google is to is to gather all the researchers across Google who are working in the kids space and show them this kind of framework and see what everyone is doing in that space to see how they are applying these 8 and what other research we should do. So Amanda Third, who is the Western Sydney, Australia, we went back to her and we said, can we get a little bit more on what does it mean to create and content, and what is good content for well-being? So we're diving in a little bit more to get a sense of what kids are saying about creating and also the content that they're using. And just as gaming is social, creating is social, content is social, all of it, everything is social for kids, because kids are social beings. And what we're finding is that this idea of agency is just so critically important. And I just want to mention that I think that it is the self-actualization, which is one of the 8, is really a critical one for me that often doesn't show up on many of these frameworks. It's more like, let's protect kids, let's make sure that they're not getting in trouble, blah, blah, blah. It's all about protecting, protecting, protecting. And I think this self-actualization and giving kids agency is really important. And that means letting them find their ways. And one of the things that Amanda Third said is that what's interesting is that kids know that part of growth is encountering things that they don't necessarily agree with or like. And instead of completely sanitizing their worlds, in order to grow, you need to see things maybe that you don't necessarily agree with or like. And that helps you decide what's important to you and what your values are. And so that's something I'm just thinking about a lot. That doesn't mean we're going to be like letting everyone go wild on the internet at all. But it is a very interesting thing when developmental science and policy recommendations and age-based parameters sort of meet each other, because we really have to think about what is in the best interest of children, and sometimes that is not necessarily what a particular age-based regulation might suggest. And so it is all very interesting, and that's something that we see these 8 and think about what that really means in practice. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. Thank you, Jen. We're going to go right back down the line now. I'm going to ask each of you to maybe offer up a suggestion or an idea or a positive question for the group here. So Jan, you shared some preliminary results. Obviously this work is ongoing. You're flying to Santiago. Is that what you said? What time? Sunday. So anyway, just kidding. So I was curious to know what you might suggest for those in the room who are designing games or just designing in general or thinking about this. What are some ideas that you think might become bubble up to the level of recommendations based on what you've already learned and seen coming?
Yeah, thank you. I think the first step is awareness, and that's why we're really excited to see so many designers in this room. And I hope that continues. And I hope well-being at some point becomes one word and not one that's hyphenated, because Multimedia also started as hyphenated, and when it became mainstream, it became one word, right? So hopefully that'll happen, and that will be an indication that it's on people's minds. So the notion that designers actually realize how important this issue is, that's the first step of awareness, and then take action. And the best place to start would be to look at the framework and all the different facets of what well-being could look like, and what that would mean to you as a designer, because that is a big framework with a lot of different components, and some of them will speak to you, and some of them will be those that you would want to apply. And then one thing that we're also hoping for is that some of you will join us and maybe even reach out and say, we're interested in doing the similar research that you've been doing with the playtesting, and can you help us set that up? Can you suggest measures? Can you give us feedback on our research designs, etc.? Which is the kind of outreach we hope to be able to engage in, so that it's not upon researchers at a university to do that, but for the industry to say, we want to do that as well. And then another one, and those are all very, very high-level ones. We'll get to much more specific ones once we've analyzed all the data. But another one is to, as an industry, once we have taken a focus on responsibility when it comes to innovation and technology for children, to then inform the parents, because the parents are really feeling at a complete loss. They see the iPads in their kids' hands. Many of them don't understand the games that they're playing because they're not gamers. And parents, as you know, many of you probably are parents, we're very busy people. I include myself with that. I can't check every game that my kids are playing. So if we as an industry, beyond ratings, can inform and educate parents about our initiatives that we're doing in this space, I think that would go a long way. And to counter the media narrative, which is iPads or digital tools are scary and screen time is bad, and see all the bad things that happen, counter that with the positive examples and the positive efforts that are happening.
Thank you. That's it's one thing that I'll call out in the RITEC report is that we've been talking about the RITEC 8 as establishing kind of the working definition, and coming soon, or something that you yourself may be taking up if you believe in this work, is around indicators. So how do we know, not just the researchers like Jan said, but also so that folks who are designing know what to look for to show that the work they're doing is successful in a given area. And eventually, we hope to lead to affordances. What kind of design recommendations does that mean, so that it can be very practical and something that can be learned from by an entire community? Jan also mentioned something that's really contentious in this project, which is whether to hyphenate well-being. Raise your hand if you hyphenate well-being. Oh. Raise your hand if you do not hyphenate well-being. Okay, I think the no hyphen.
We are the majority.
Oh boy. Okay, good to know. Thank you. See you later. No, okay. So on to Elizabeth. Thank you. Your presentation was so fun. LEGO has taken such an important leadership position in this space by creating this project and supporting it as you have. I was curious to know what your thoughts were, your guidance for other companies that want to enter this space. What would you say to help them get started and to conceptualize their own relationship to this work?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a super question. I love it. I like it nice and easy. Especially, I think the LEGO group, we aren't doing this alone, right? So the LEGO Foundation is really behind us and helping us, all of us, with this project. But if I could throw out a challenge to you, the designers, something that I would love to see more of are definitions of digital well-being. KPIs. What have you seen? Key performance indicators that that we can use to strengthen and bolster our own work. If I had to say what was my question? What can they do? What can other companies do?
Yes.
Join us. It's just that simple, join us. I'm not going to start singing "Everything is Awesome." I feel like I should, but really join us in this collaboration, in this movement, because it's almost as if we're getting a sort of an internet do-over, right? So many things have already happened as far as the first visions of internet, then Web 2.0. Now we are right at the metaverse and all of these digital experiences. What is this going to look like, and what is going to be the future, not just for children, but for adult users? You, the designers and the digital designers, it's just amazing the power and the strength that you have that's in this room to help us all figure it out. I mean, I wear a digital child safety hat. I'm also a lawyer, so I can sit here and argue and beat the drum forever about why we should be doing this. It's the right thing to do. It's best interest of the child. It's in the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. It's in this law, California this, and in New York that. But it's you, the designers, who can really make this sort of a no-brainer. Because as Jen was talking about with child online protection, something that I've seen the past 12 years in this space is that we really are no longer talking about risk and harms in that way. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about children who have more resilience and parents who are empowered, who kind of get it. And so that's where you can come in and help us, because by creating something where it is digital well-being is already integrated, well-being by design is already there, it becomes easy to say, oh yeah, well this is great. My child is going to feel better when they get off. My child will have agency. My child will have competence when they close their screen or shut down that game. Just a quick thought that crossed my mind. How many of you have children or have seen children using different sort of apps that help them, like educational apps like Khan Academy or Duolingo? Okay, the hands are going up, right? So when you see apps and digital experiences like this that you know that your children are getting benefits, of course you sign them up. You sit them in front of the screen, you ask them to do more, perhaps you even have to give them little carrots and say, come on, you do 20 minutes of this or 30 minutes of that. This is a great opportunity, and this is what we're looking for with the RITEC 8. Having all of those outputs so that way parents and families want to be able to get in front of a screen and are able to also step off that screen. That is really the importance. And again, if I had to say what's my call out, is that you stay in contact with us, go by the Creativity Lounge, find me on LinkedIn. All of you digital designers, I want to hear from each and every one of you about what you're doing, what your companies are doing, because really we can't do it alone.
That's the call to action of the day. Thank you. Fantastic. And there is a QR code on the slide. Hopefully it's working for folks. So it's going to stay up for a while. Jen, you gave us a really wonderful deep dive into process, how you think about frameworks, how you brought RITEC into the conversation around the products that you're making at Google. Not every company has a dedicated team of the size that you work with, or the resources to invest in a lot of child trust and safety kind of work. But I was curious to know, for a more general audience, let's say, for whom this is newer or don't have the resources, what kind of recommendations might you share?
Well, I think taking a look at this report will give you a lot of information about what you should be thinking of, what you should be doing, a lot of the definitions. Also, again, I don't mean to plug Play Academy, but I think that if you are, Play Academy is not just how to get something good on the Play Store. It is really in some ways, overview of thinking about kids and what's good for kids and thinking about designing for them. So I think reading those two resources, and then there is a host of other free things on the internet. Just use Google to search for it. But there's a lot of free stuff about learning about kids and how they develop. And the other thing is just talk to kids, talk to teachers. That's not that expensive to just go out and have a conversation, see what's on kids' mind. See what teachers care about and what teachers are talking about. And I think that the one thing I would also say is that if you're a designer and you're thinking about getting in, and you're in the kids space or thinking of getting into the kids space, that educational and entertaining are not polar opposites. And this idea of, well, if it's educational, it has to be rote and boring and dull, and if it's entertaining, it can't have any of those things. And I think that's a real false dichotomy, and I think clearly, if you see what Lego can do, there's a lot of both very entertaining and learning opportunities from there. And I would also say that to not forget some of the social skills and the emotional skills. And if you look at the RITEC 8, one is, I think, about informing or knowledge or that kind of thing, accumulating information. The rest of it is this social emotional kind of work. There is a real need for good quality social emotional experiences online. There's not that much. What there is, it's really focused on preschoolers. So if you are looking to get into a space thinking about social emotional for slightly older kids and thinking about ways that you can help kids feel agency, calm down, keep persisting, all of those things that are just good life skills to have. But yeah, even if you don't have a lot of money, there are a lot of free resources out there that'll help give you sort of child development and designing for kids 101.
Thank you. That's fantastic guidance, and clearly informed by a lot of knowledge of looking across the entire field. Okay, so it's question time. I'm going to ask one bonus question of the panel, but if you have a question, there's a microphone, a really friendly microphone in the middle of the aisle here, so please line up if you'd like to ask a question in the time that remains. So my bonus question for the folks while folks stand up is, what keeps you up at night about this topic? Is there something that is out there that we didn't cover today that it just seems like, gosh, if only we could do this, or this is something I think about a lot? Did I stump the panel? I might have stumped the panel.
Okay. I'm excited about what we can do with generative AI that we haven't, right now it's not, at scale, it's not releasable to kids, but at some point we can think about how to use it. I know there's a lot right now in education with papers and that kind of thing, but I'm thinking even younger kids, is there a way that we can use it to harness their creativity and use it in a really good way? So thinking about what those products are, what those opportunities are, that's something. It's keeping me up at night, but like in a good way. I read some of those same articles you're all reading, and I'm like, okay, this is freaking me out. But I also think there's a real opportunity. And I just remember when the internet was kind of invented, and everyone was freaking out about that, and search, and we can find all the information, and it's going to stop people from thinking critically. And I just don't think that is ever going to go away. So how can we use it to really enhance this critical thinking?
I mean, apparently if you talk to ChatGPT enough, it tells you it loves you, so that feels like a well-being.
Yeah, right, yes.
You want to go ahead?
No, I'm not going to go ahead. I'm going to let them take a question.
Okay, good. Let's go to
I'll come afterwards.
Let's go to the studio audience. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Neha. First of all, thank you for this panel. I just started a company where I'm building a kid-focused family communications app, and my target group is 7 to 14. And I'm working with an advisory board of child psychologists because even though it's like disrupting the greeting card industry and looking at SEL, I want the very DNA of my product to have children's wellness at the heart of it, right? So I don't want to be an afterthought. So it's just hard, it's great just seeing how many people are in the room too. So I'll stop gushing about that. My question is, right, so I've worked in tech for almost a decade and a half or so, and the number one thing they say is talk to your users and and that's why I'm a big proponent of DEI in tech as well, because I'm like, the more people who are the people who are consuming the tech are involved in the building of the tech, you'll have a better product, period, rather than like a bunch of folks, and not to bash SF folks, but just a bunch of people in Silicon Valley building things saying, we're gonna change the world, but it's not representative of like, who's gonna use it at the end of the day. But what I feel like I'm struggling with, and I wonder if others struggle with, is, my age group, I have gotten kids, but it's really hard. It's actually hard for me to find parents in like a mass way. Like it's very, like I feel qualitative research is kind of the name of the game for what I'm doing anyway. But like I can't have kids fill out surveys and say, hey, I surveyed like 500 kids or 5,000 kids, right? Like that's a little trickier because permission, consent, things like that. So I'm curious, right? Like, especially with kids being more digital, do you see, I guess, yeah, I'm curious, like what avenues, and if others want to talk to me about this, I'm very curious about like, how do we get real end user experience into the products we're building, especially when they're kids between the ages 7 to 14?
Well, what we do is we establish partnerships with institutions that would have those kids as their users, as their clients, as their whatever they are, right? It might be an after-school program. And when we establish partnerships, we do that in a way that we give back to them, right? We don't just go there and say, we want your kids and we want them to be part of our work. We give something back, and that looks differently in different situations. But there are many organizations that would welcome that kind of an input, especially if they could then tell the kids that they are co-designing products with you, right? That's factoring into our empowerment category, and that would be actually another addition or another way of enhancing well-being.
I think, well, first I just also want to give a plug to my friends here at Fluent, who are expert in the front, who are Nellie and Stephanie, who are an agency that does this kind of thing all the time, and you can talk to them about how they do that. Yeah, I think a lot of it is even like going down to the Boys and Girls Club in your neighborhood, or asking friends, or doing surveys. You could use SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, just online. It's not a great sample as you would get if you partner with a great agency, which Fluent does a lot of international work for us as well. So I think there are ways to do this on the cheap, but there's also ways to do it, with these tools, with these online tools like through Facebook or any of these others. You're getting your own ecosystem. But if you can go to neighborhoods near you and asking, schools, after schools, you can certainly do that. There are a lot of surveys that actually come out that sort of talk about general patterns and stuff. Again, just Googling kids 7 to 12, 14, what their digital technology trends are. But the qualitative, I wouldn't ignore the qualitative. The qualitative at the product level, at the like, here, do you like this? Do you use it? Aruj does this all the time, where she's out like showing them, and then we're like, oh, actually they can do that. We didn't think they could, or they're thinking like that. And so I think, again, there's a lot of resources on the internet. There's ways to do those bigger surveys, but for product research, you really want to see people using the product.
Thank you.
Can I just do something really crazy here?
If you want.
Oh, thank you. No, it's just because we only have 4 minutes left. You have a question, there's another question behind you, and there's a woman in yellow who had been wanting to ask a question. So I just want to make sure that we get all three.
Quick.
So go.
Are we allowed to go over? Is there I think
They're not going to kick you out of the room.
you go on.
We can go to the Lego play now.
Can't click.
There she goes. She's leaving right now. Okay. She's been trying to get a hold of Yan. I saw you raise your hand the entire time, so I was just trying to give enough time for you.
Go.
What a gentleman! I gotta find a Lego for you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I will give you my drink as well. Actually, I'm a media researcher, and I did a lot of research the media importance between among children. I'm very interested in Google's and Lego's effort, and my question is, first thing, the Lego's strategy is a kind of commercial strategy. It seems like a commercial one to get into metaverse situation. I'd like to know. I'd like to hear about your opinion and Lego's thought about these media changes. And the second one is about Google's effort. Actually, whenever I visited the conference about digital technology, and then all the designers and all big tech companies said we'd like to protect our children, we'd like to encourage our children more social and more emotional. But as you know, nowadays media affordance is getting more and more individualized. I'd like to know how to balance the individualized media circumstances and to get more social, because your opinions and your presentation is getting focused on online situation, not balance online and offline interaction is my question.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge conversation. I'm happy to start it with you in the play lounge, but
There are a lot of questions. Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your
thank you though.
Hi, Tom with Playbig. Thank you for having this. We connect screens and devices to physical sports and recreation, so the gameplay experience can go back and forth. My question is, might RITEC ever become not a governing board, but someone who provides certification? Because my organization, if I could pay you a fee, a revenue, so you could do more research and bless what I'm doing, might RITEC ever do those kind of things? Have a stamp of approval?
That's a very good question. It's funny, we have talked about that in a sort of a broad sense. I would say my own personal orientation is I like to invest in people, that helping to mobilize folks who want to do this work and understand it well and become both ambassadors and leaders for the work is where I'd like to see movement and investment. But I do know that you know, from discussions with Jan, for example, that parents do look for certifications and consumers, schools and parent consumers, for a validation, and I understand the value of it. We'll have to see, does the path that we go on for the next couple of phases lead in that direction? And then who might be the best suited to lead such a thing? Those are unanswered questions, but it's a really interesting one.
Stay in touch.
Stay in touch, stay tuned. Thank you.
Last question.
One more question.
Oh, thank you. My name is Rehan Mahmood, Engineered Solutions. We're currently in the discovery phase for a caregiving technology. So I see a lot of intersections because we're aiming to solve a lot of the challenges that family caregivers have with compassion fatigue. When we talk about well-being, when you're caring for special needs situations, aging adults come to mind, but also children. We've primarily focused on the aging adults, but this has opened up my mind again for RITEC because I'm interested to see your thoughts, and some of this common sense. What are the intersections that you see, either through the research phase, that you can design stuff that's more ubiquitous for both categories, and just in general, how you can construct better research that can, you know, go and provide greater difference?
So if I understand correctly, you're interested in the connection between what we were talking about and mature adults, aging adults?
Exactly.
I completely agree. There are very many parallels. In fact, some of our research has focused on mature adults. And the way we have to think about it, there's a lot that those two problems have in common. Of course, in our case, the kind of games we selected, we would want to make sure that they're appropriate for those adults, etc. But that is a very interesting topic that we're also working on. Not as part of this project, but as part of other projects we're involved in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so bless you. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for our panelists. John, Elizabeth, Jen, it was wonderful. We'll see you in the Play Lounge, room 403 across the hall.